Sometimes when you're driving down the road all by yourself, you begin to hear a voice that tells you need to look around, pay attention. Maybe something isn't quite right. That voice is me. It's the voice of Gord. Hey everybody, quick turnaround on this episode. Just finished recording a little short discussion with Mr. Mocha Bezirgan, one of the few legitimate journalists remaining in Canada. Obviously, this week, very big news coming out of the Coutts situation, which we discuss in a little bit of detail here. The whole travesty of injustice is coming apart at the seams, and there's nobody in Canada asking the pertinent questions about this, and they're not going to. They are bought and paid for regime stenographers, and all of them are absolutely useless, and you shouldn't listen to them. You should listen to people like Mocha or Trish Wood or me or Megan Murphy or any number of other small and alternative podcasters and writers, because the fourth estate in Canada is gone. You can't count on them to ask the most legitimate questions about major issues facing our democracy. And Mocha and I get into a little bit of that today. There's going to be some writing from me this weekend, hopefully, on my Substack, which you should go and subscribe to, autonomoustruckers.substack.com. Obviously, you're listening to this podcast, so if you're not subscribed to Voice of Gord at any of your favorite podcasting platforms, g'day to my friends down under, listening live on the Australian On the Road Radio Network. We'll get back to them shortly. I'm hoping to get Glenn or Mike or one of them on the show here eventually. Jeez, it's been months. What else is going on? Lots of writing coming up. I'm working on some pitches at some major media. This Coutts story is so huge. A modern Western nation state had political prisoners for 2 years based on heinous charges, and they just dropped them as if they didn't exist because they were vaporware the whole time. Questions need to be asked. I'm so happy that Jerry Morin and Chris Lysak are back with their families and they're out of incarceration. Lots of questions going on with this case. There's still drama. There's still nonsense. We still need to raise money for them. Tony Olenek and Chris Carbert are still in jail. My Give, Send, Go for the boys is still live, and I would appreciate any donations. In the show notes, including links to Mr. Bezirgan and his reporting, I'll send you a link for the Give, Send, Go. Like I say, any donation would be well appreciated. I want everybody to keep their eyes on this case. It's still ongoing. There's still much to discuss. And man, when are we going to take it to the government? When are people going to wake up and realize that you no longer have the right to freedom of speech and the right to protest in Canada? They can pick you up, charge you with the most heinous crimes, throw you in jail for 2 years, deny you bail, and then they can just be like, oh yeah, conspiracy to murder? Oh, we didn't mean it. We're just going to drop that. We live in a totalitarian banana republic in Canada in 2024, and y'all need to wake the fuck up. All right, let's get to the last decent journalist in Canada, Mr. Mocha Bezirgan. Let's go. All right, g'day everybody. Welcome back to the Voice of Gord podcast. Got a special, I wouldn't call it an emergency episode, but very, very of the time, given the news coming out of Coutts, Alberta, or Lethbridge, I should say, from the courtroom. The other voice you're going to hear today has risen to quite a position of prominence in Canada for his coverage of the Coutts 4, and I would posit that the gentleman you're about to hear is the last journalist in Canada. All of the rest of them are regime filleting clowns and do not deserve the title, but this man does. Would you please welcome to the show, Mr. Mocha Bezirgan?
Hello, everyone. Well, that was a very high endorsement. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, it just seems to me like I've been following your work now for a few months, and one of the things that really floored me was in one of your videos you had mentioned that we have this ongoing trial in Coutts, or pre-trial motions. The trial
Mhm.
actually hasn't started yet. People who follow me know all about the Coutts story, or at least they should. But you're there, and at one point you said that they had the first two rows of the courtroom reserved for accredited media, and you were the only one showing up, so they got rid of the accredited media section and just let anybody sit there. Is that what went down?
Eventually, that's what happened, and accredited media wouldn't even join online to watch the proceedings. At some point, the members of the public would join and they wouldn't know how to mute their microphone. So everyone agreed, both Crown and defense, that let's shut down the online streaming. And the judge asked, hey, is there any members of the accredited media watching? Not a peep. So they shut it down completely, and there was no accredited media in the gallery. So it was just me, and I just couldn't believe it because this is Chris Carbert's bail review hearing. Why wouldn't anyone be interested in that? But that's what happened. There are other media showing up, but they are not accredited. So, and it's very strict policy there for this hearing where they don't allow you to bring cell phones, sometimes not even the courthouse, let alone the courtroom. So people leave it in the car and they come and, it's very hard to get information out. But if you're accredited media, you can, as long as you're not breaching the publication ban.
Right. Well, before we get into all these extra details about the case and your coverage of it, Um, like I said, you've risen to prominence here somewhat recently, given the nature of this case, and now people are finally starting to pay attention to it. But you've been there the whole time, and quite possibly the only person reporting on it with accreditation, as we put it. But tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into the journalism game, Mocha. And also, as I understand it, you're quite a young fella too.
Yes, I guess I'm still young. I'm 24 years old. I, well, it's a long story how I got into journalism, but basically, when I was 18 years old, I was in Turkey. No, actually, I came to Canada when I was 18. But around the ages of 16 to 18, I was in Turkey, and I was immune to propaganda in Turkey because I grew up in Canada until I was 7. So the school system, the media, how they propagated state ideals, etc. They didn't affect me, and I could see it. I could smell it right away, and I could see everyone else is falling for it. And so that was interesting. And when I came back to Canada, I realized similar patterns, but not as um, big as in Turkey. However, in Turkey, I got in trouble with the police. I had to go to the police station twice to give a statement, not because I'm a drug trafficker or a murderer or any of that, but because I was making funny videos, making fun of the regime, making fun of the government and their propaganda.
So making fun of President Erdogan and his party.
That's right. And the videos went viral, millions of views. It was a great success. I couldn't walk on the street. People would always stop me for pictures. My
So
friends, they
you were famous in Turkey.
Oh yes, I was there a few months ago, and I still get recognized on the street, despite having been 7, 8 years. And so, we became sort of legend that impacted a new generation's outlook on life by exposing and making fun of state propaganda. And, it is illegal to make fun of the president, to insult the president, they call it. And even if you're criticizing it, they could make you, the process is the punishment, and tens of thousands of people every year are sued by the president personally to get them through that process, even though if it was not an insult but a criticism. At some point, the
So
government.
you come. So basically, your family are Turkish. You came to Canada, were born here. You went back to Turkey. You engaged in making these funny videos criticizing the government, and the state of Turkey does not have the sort of guarantees of free speech as you would have them in the United States, and we used to have them in Canada. I use the term "used to" specifically and on purpose because it appears you no longer have the right to free speech in Canada. But like you grew up in a non-Western country under a different set of standards, and then you come to Canada and look around at what's going on now, right? Like I see some similarities with your experience, and many of the Freedom Convoy truckers in Ottawa were from Eastern Europe, and
Yeah,
they and their families have experience, and if not direct experience, at least a family history of dealing with authoritarian regimes in Eastern Europe under the old Iron Curtain. So you come to Canada and look around now in 2024, and through your eyes of having experience in Turkey, what do you see going on here that people should be worried about?
well, I think they should be worried about the personalities that are ruling this country. And for example, Justin Trudeau, his behavior, his pattern of behavior of interfering with the justice system. Remember the SNC-Lavalin case when they brought up a new law, they made up a new law so that SNC-Lavalin executives wouldn't have to go to jail and they would just get a slap on the wrist. And Justin Trudeau would interfere with the justice minister, trying to pressure her to not prosecute this huge French construction giant that was engaged in corruption across the globe. So that's a pattern of behavior. That's not a one-time thing. How do I know that? I know that from his ethics violations. Like how many times did he violated the ethics? Many, many times, and nothing happened. Nothing happens because not many people in Canada care about politics. And the way Canadian politics work, it works through ghettos and power brokers. There are certain individuals who are prominent in certain ethnic or religious ghettos, and they collude with Trudeau or whoever they want to put in power. And then that person that is in power now have to cooperate with them. For example, Jagmeet Singh, Justin Trudeau has to cooperate with Jagmeet Singh because Jagmeet Singh right now has almost more power than Justin Trudeau, even though he only got 30,000 votes in
Oh no,
Canada.
he does because Jagmeet Singh holds all the cards. The minute that Jagmeet Singh doesn't get what he wants, there's going to be a confidence motion brought to bear on Justin Trudeau, and his government is over because of his minority position in Parliament. Like Jagmeet Singh is the most powerful man in Canada and deserves a great deal of blame for what's going on here.
That's right. So, but is this what real democracy look like? 30,000 people voted for Jagmeet, and now he has power over the destiny of millions. He has power over the pockets of millions. Unbelievable to me.
It sure is. I mean, one of the things we're facing, especially with this case with the men in Coutts, is just the sheer absurdity of it all. And it's being revealed that we do not, in fact, live in a democracy, and a democratic country, as one of its pillars that holds it all up, is a free press, and a press that the term was the fourth estate. They're supposed to hold the government to account. They are supposed to apply skepticism and investigate what the government is doing because the government has the monopoly on violence. and they set policy and they have a great deal of
Right.
power in society, and the media are supposed to hold them to account. And in Canada, they're not doing that. In Canada, which is supposedly a modern Western nation state, we have this example of these political prisoners, these four guys that got picked up at the Freedom Convoy protest site in Coutts. And every single aspect of this story points to them having been abused for the last 2 years for politics. Where's the media? They are nowhere. Who's there? Mocha Bezirgan.
Well, thank you. My interest in the men and in this case grew last year when I realized no media is showing up. And those who are showing up are abandoning the principle of innocent until proven guilty. And those who would disagree with RCMP and not trust RCMP on any other matter, for some reason, is trusting them on this one. Now, conspiracy to commit murder on RCMP is a serious charge, and but innocent until proven guilty still applies. And with the recent plea deal that let the two men go, and we saw the Crown prosecutor, special prosecutor Stephen Johnson, who also prosecuted Arthur Pawlowski, a pastor who also gave a speech in Coutts, and other truckers. I'm not saying this to disparage, but a vicious prosecutor. I never thought he would drop such a serious charge like that as if it was nothing. So I think this vindicates the principle of innocent until proven guilty.
Right, it does. Well, I mean, so for those who are following at home here, 2 days ago, Jerry Morin and Chris Lysak, two of the Coutts Four, were let out of jail on a plea deal. And in that plea deal, the Crown dropped the most heinous of the charges that they'd been accused of, which is conspiracy to murder police officers. It is my contention that those charges were laid on them in order to make a political statement and in order to keep them in jail and in order to legitimate Justin Trudeau's invocation of the Emergencies Act, and that there was nothing to it. And when you look at all of the evidence, there is nothing to it. And now the government, or at least the Crown prosecutor, has basically admitted there's nothing to it because they dropped it and gave these guys a plea deal. If the charge is that serious, and conspiring to murder someone is a pretty serious charge, and you just, oh, poof, that didn't happen. Oh, we're dropping it. I mean, that must, like, to any thinking person, that's got to raise some alarm bells about the veracity of the charge to begin with. And in the 2 days since this news came down, I've looked around at CTV and CBC. They're not asking these deep questions. They're just like, oh, these Freedom Convoy guys pled to a lesser charge and now they're out. Like, no discussion about the context in which this case exists, no discussion about the politics behind it, no asking the basic question of what happened to those charges? Why is it they just dropped these like heinous, like conspiracy to murder? That's a big deal. Oh, no more? What happened? Nobody's asking that question. I mean, you are. I am. Why don't we work for the CBC? Like, what's going on here?
Well, the mainstream media and most of the independent media in Canada are financially compromised. They might do good work, but eventually you can't bite the hand that feeds you. And if you're getting funding from the government, you're going to have to save face for them. Otherwise, you're not going to get your funding. So the case of the Coutts 4 was one of those cases where independent media actively colluded to suppress and not have this story be brought to the attention of the public due to business interest and political interest, because it went against that. It went against PR as well, public relation interest. You know, you don't want your news outlet to be reporting on people who are conspired to commit murder, right? They also knew that their audience who doesn't trust RCMP, would have their own thoughts separate from the narrative they want to push. And they would start asking questions to the premier, Daniel Smith, to Pierre Poilievre, etc., which these independent media outlets who are getting, advertisements, funding, money from these political parties didn't want. So that is my analysis of the situation. And when I realized they're not showing up, I started showing up and covering it and crowdfunding it myself, saying, I'm only able to do this kind of reporting because I'm my own boss. I have my own media company. And now I'm in a position where I could say, and this happened pretty quick, now I could say that I'm going to rescue talented journalists from these exploitative organizations that are hoarding talent to keep it off the market. And I called out yesterday publicly to those journalists who are being paid peanuts and their talents being curtailed. I called them out and I said, the only reason why you're hired and you're working there so that you're not independent, so that you're controlled. Because if you have finance, they can afford to pay you wages. They can't afford to have to see you having financial independence, because once you have financial independence, you have editorial independence and you can publish anything you want and cover the stories that you want, which would go contrary to their goals of keeping a monopoly on public opinion.
Right.
So,
So
yeah,
on that note, I had a listener and friend ask me a question. I told him I was going to be speaking with you today. He wanted to know if you had plans, and it seems like you might, to hire other journalists and say,
yeah.
"Hey, come work with me, Mocha Bezirgan, and we will do actual journalism." Like, is that part of your game plan going forward?
Absolutely. This is the plan. This is the way to go forward. I have collected lots of donations now, and I want to use that money to grow the company and hire, not hire anyone from the start, but take away the talent from these other hoarding organizations who are hiring very talented people, but then giving them insignificant tasks so that they are not reaching to their full potential and paying them peanuts and taking them off the market just to keep them there.
Right.
And I
So
don't want that. I want to take these people away from them and put wings on them. And not just any journalist, but journalists with integrity I'm looking for.
right. Have you found any? So you've been showing up in Lethbridge for all of the pre-trial hearings and other legal business going on with the Coutts guys. At various points, some mainstream journalists have shown up, from what I understand. And when they have, like, did you have discussions with them at all? Like, what's going on with those folks, given your possible interactions with them?
A young man from CBC would show up rarely, maybe once, maybe twice I saw him. Um, and he would take notes and then CBC would publish an article. But that's pretty much it. I've been to maybe 10 hearings now, and 10 out of 8 or 10 out of 9, I did not see any mainstream media. Mainstream media would only show up after the trial is over and everyone is gone, and they would bring out their camera and do their stand up in front of the courthouse and then go away. And that is also very rare. Most of the time, they would not visit the courthouse at all. And also, thank you for, your interview with Tucker Carlson brought lots of attention to this issue. And because Tucker Carlson is seen as a hero by the audience of these independent media organizations, now they have to do 180 and start covering the story. But they were nowhere to be seen on Tuesday when the surprise um, plea deal
Well,
occurred.
one of the dynamics in the Canadian media, which I'm sure you've discovered since you've been working here, is that the Canadian media and the sort of wider Canadian cultural zeitgeist, such as it is heavily um, pathologized by its relationship to the neighbors, to the United States. There's a whole the CBC and other institutions in Canada are guilty of turning Canadians into these navel gazing, insular, retarded, brain dead idiots that can only think of themselves and are constantly comparing ourselves to the US. Like, we can't stand on our own 2 feet. We can't do anything like legitimately ourselves. It's always what's going on in America. So I don't know if you remember, you probably would have been a kid, but like, there used to be this TV host in the United States named Jon Stewart. And any
Mhm.
time that Jon Stewart mentioned Canada, it would be front page news on the newspapers. It would be on TV. It was like, oh my God, Jon Stewart mentioned us. This is amazing. Because
Yeah.
he did the Daily Show and he was against the war in Iraq, like I
Mm-hmm.
was back in the day. And,
Mm-hmm.
it's just it's a point of evidence of this like weird relationship we have. And it's amazing seeing this happen with Tucker coming to Alberta. Tucker mentions the Coutts guys, boom, all of a sudden the media have to pull their thumbs out of their ass and actually start
Right.
reporting on what's going on in their own backyard. Like my thesis keeps being proved with every move on this case. It's amazing.
It's about, for these organizations that are doing 180, it's about PR for them, public relations, business interests, and political interests, not journalistic principles like the presumption of innocence and just reporting the news. Even if you come there and report in a very critical way, that is amazing. As long as you report, as long as you're not staying home, people need to know, people need to hear about it. But I think they stopped reporting on it because no one would buy their narrative and everyone can smell what's going on.
Yeah, and this case stinks to the high heavens. Everything about it sucks. Hey, like I know you're probably these publication bans. Something I want people to understand about the publication bans is the first one came out care of the defense. Why? Because the media, when they were discussing these Coutts men, they weren't talking to the men or their families or providing a holistic picture of what went on. They were just repeating claims from the RCMP and the Crown, right? And a judge looked at those claims and said, these are unsubstantiated allegations, right? Without any test in court yet, no initial bit of evidence to support them. So we have to stop you guys from reporting on it because it's going to poison the pool of potential jurors. There are still articles live online from these mainstream media outlets in Canada from before that publication ban talking about these things that were never taken down. And then after the publication ban came out, this is my theory. I don't know. I could be wrong. I believe they hid behind it. They used the publication ban to just stop reporting on it, right? Because it was like, oh, okay, cool. Well, the court says we can't talk about it. And then the second publication ban comes down, which is downstream of another case that basically said journalists such as yourself
Yeah.
cannot discuss pretrial hearings whatsoever.
Yeah.
Do I have that correct?
That's what happened. And it was like I didn't even know about this. And the judge would mention it, and it was like very obscure. I'm like, what's going on here? What is this case they're talking about? Then I looked it up and I read about it. I'm like, oh wow, every pre-trial hearing is not to be reported by the media. It's going to be under publication ban. And when we talk about, the people I interview, you yourself, everyone refers to um, this situation of the four men having, two of them now are out, but of their ordeal of more than 720 days in remand, they think it's because they are political prisoners, that there were political motives. And I think that is very plausible because let's take a look at James Sowery's case, a Canadian trucker who was imprisoned last week after his sentencing, and now he's serving a 10 months prison. The guy had no criminal record. He was an excellent citizen, as per the judge acceptance of his character, the testimonies for him, and he is going to jail because he ran over a pylon at a so-called checkpoint where there was a single RCMP vehicle and an officer, and the officer feared for his life, cried uncontrollably, shaken because
Imagine signing up to be a police officer and then crying and shaking and being afraid for your life because a guy ran over a pylon. You don't deserve the badge. Like this is a travesty. This is like political nonsense using an utter clown that should have never been in the uniform. I'm sorry, sorry to editorialize, man, but that the James Sowery thing, it should have been the Coutts Five. You know, that guy, that guy should not be in jail, and his family should not be being punished because of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Because when you have other, politically connected criminals being let go and or at least given a slap on the wrist, and you have real criminals, cop killers, etc., being let out on bail. And then you see this case, that's why I'm interested in this case, because I want to see how justice system works against people who are not politically connected, who are not rich, who are not powerful. I want to see how justice works against them. And yes, Avery is in prison right now. He's serving his sentence. And the judge in the ruling stressed that this is not about Sawery's politics. But the judge also acknowledges that he's satisfied that Sawery acted on political motivations with
This
his.
is so ridiculous. I love hearing a judge weigh in on the supposed political motivations of people before their court.
Yeah.
76% of the judiciary in Canada are donors to and members of the Liberal Party, and their career depends on ruling on cases in a way that pleases the regime. That's what's going on here. And like, especially with this lady, and I can use her name because I'm in the United States and I can say what I want. Jonah Kubik, the woman who basically like abused Chris Carbert and allowed his bail application appeal to move forward, and then like had a date set before Christmas and then delayed it to January and then delayed it again and then was like, no, we're not letting you out. Like, the woman's a psychopath and she should be disbarred or thrown off the bench. The judiciary in Canada needs to be depoliticized at very least.
Yeah, it was interesting that just to announce a date on when the bail hearing is going to take place, they need to delay it at least like a month just to announce the date. So a month later, you come back and they announce the date. So you go back to jail. And then a month later, you come back again. Now they're having the hearing of, the real bail hearing. And then you get denied. And this was the second time Chris Carbert was given a bail hearing, which is under publication ban. So the reasons why it was denied, the evidence against him, etc., those are all under publication ban. James Sowery's proceeding is not under publication ban. And I think if we look at that proceeding, which was under a different judge, but you could see how much it's emphasized that, oh, this persecution, this is not political. Although I am satisfied that Sawery acted on political motivations with his opposition to COVID-19 mandates. And when you think about it, when you read the transcripts, which I will obtain today from the court and publish it, the judge basically said, and the prosecutor too, a message needs to be sent to the rest of the protesters, to the rest of the Canadian public, that such behavior of running over pylons, scaring police officers will not be tolerated.
Yes,
And
and an accidental incident will not be tolerated. I mean, they're just coming out and saying the quiet part out loud. Like, there's a German political philosopher named Carl Schmitt, and he has this really famous quote that said, the primary distinction between, when you're investigating political decisions is that between friend and enemy, right? And, I don't care. Anybody that thinks Canada is still a democracy, no. We are run by a regime, much like the United States is run by a regime, and they are outposts of this worldwide movement of globalism, global homogeneity, and it's all very political. And you see that at a granular level with the treatment of people who were engaging in their once protected rights to peaceful assembly and protest and to petition the government to change policies and fix things. And now, if you do that in Canada, you'll just get picked up and thrown in jail. Like, one of the things about this Coutts thing that I don't I don't think people quite understand, and part of the reason they don't understand is because of the media, is that if you can get picked up by the cops, thrown in jail, have these incredibly spurious, heinous charges thrown against you, held for 2 years, and then have the charges dropped like a hot potato, and
Right.
you have that hanging over your head, like, do you still have the right to protest? I don't believe you do.
Well, I think that's a right that has been under attack for a long time, especially with the truckers' protest, which the enforcement has created a trauma on the Canadian people. Now, Canadian people are afraid to donate to civil right causes or to independent media through online, and they want to send donations instead through email because they're afraid that their bank accounts might be frozen. And when I see this, when I hear this, I feel the utmost disgust against the government for causing this fear and trauma on ordinary people for the most basic right to right of freedom of association.
Yeah, no, it's all very worrisome and very disgusting. Mocha Bezirgan, I understand you have to go to a meeting here real soon. You've been very generous with your time. Do you have any parting thoughts or ways people can follow you and ways people can help?
I would appreciate if people checked out mediabezirgan.com and they could see all of my coverage since last year about the Coutts 4 case and many other stories. Right now, I'm working on an infrastructure scandal, another one from Gordie Howe International Bridge Project. Yes, that's what I'm talking about. The bridge project that was pitched as $1 billion project by the Harper government, but now it's costing almost $7 billion. It's and it, when you do the calculation of the payments that are going to be made by the government for the next 30 years, um, toll revenue alone is not going to cover it, and Canadians are going to be in debt forever, at least 61 years to forever. So we will be subsidizing it from our own pockets. And yeah, stay tuned. More are coming. I'm not making this up. It's all documented and publications from university, civil engineers and experts, and even, you know, the people who are running the construction.
Yeah, no, well, this is the thing is you can have all the facts and evidence and reality in the world, but when it gets filtered through or suppressed by media
Exactly.
narrative controllers who have agglomerated themselves the right to determine what is truth and what is information and what is disinformation, they themselves become the disinformation peddlers. They themselves suppress legitimate information, and it's all very Orwellian. Mocha Bezirgan, thank you very much for your time, sir. I really appreciate you joining the show and offering your insights and experience. And this was really lovely, man. Thanks for coming.
Thank you very much for having me, and I look forward to talking to you again when, more information becomes available regarding the case.
All right, awesome. All right, way of the road, everyone.